Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm Steve Pierce, Board Chair of the Berkshire Chamber of Commerce. I'd like to first thank and recognize Larry Rosenthal and Joyce Bernstein of Link to Life for sponsoring this event today. Thank you very much. Welcome to this special Chamber luncheon, and thank you for taking the time to be with us today. I especially want to thank our special guest, Governor Romney, for agreeing to meet with us today. All of us are concerned about the state's fiscal challenges, along with the many related issues, and we look forward to Governor Romney's comments as we continue a dialogue while we try to find the most appropriate and least painful solutions to the very complex issues we face. I'd like to take just a minute to acknowledge some of our elected officials who are with us today. Representative Peter Larkin, Representative Sean Kelly, Representative Smitty Pignatelli, Pittsfield Mayor Sarah Hathaway, North Adams Mayor John Barrett, and we also have several local town managers and other elected officials here today. I'd like to ask them to stand so that we can also recognize all of them, those who are here. It's now my pleasure to introduce Matt Harris, who will then introduce the governor. Matt was recently selected as chair of the Governor's Competitive Council for Berkshire County. Matt graduated from Williams College in 1994 and is a resident of Williamstown. Matt started his career at Bain Capital in 1994, becoming an associate in 1995. In 1997, Matt left Bain to become the founding director of Berkshire Capital Investors, a venture capital fund chartered to invest in Berkshire County. More recently, Matt was a co-founder and is now CEO of Village Ventures, an asset management company with a proprietary nationwide network of early-stage venture capital funds focused on emerging technology centers. I could say an awful lot more about Matt, but we want to save some time for the governor, so please welcome Matt Harris.
Thanks, Steve, and thanks for having me here today. It's true that I did work at Bain Capital, and that's actually how I got to know Governor Romney. We used to call him Mitt then, but he's definitely changed his name. Now, we were there at the same time, but I hasten to add that he was up here, and I was definitely down here. He was the most senior person at the firm, obviously, and when I was hired, I was actually the most junior person at the firm. So it was a small firm. We got to see each other, but it wasn't a power struggle between us. I think I was pretty clear. I was pretty clear on who was the boss, and that was great for me. And I had a lot to learn, still do, but certainly did then. And it was a great place to learn. And actually what I want to share with you as an introduction is not so much a litany of Governor Romney's achievements, which we all know, but rather some lessons I learned from him at a more tender age, a yet more tender age, that I think are relevant to the current situation in Massachusetts. So Bain Capital is a venture capital firm giving money to companies to grow. And there were three lessons that I came away with that Governor Romney imbued the firm with. And the first is that it's important not to panic. What's true in venture capital is that every company, they say, every company visits the emergency ward before its eventual success. And that is true in almost every case. I don't think the state is in the emergency ward, but we're having some troubles right now, fiscally. And I know that Governor Romney is not going to panic in the way that I fear many leaders might. A second lesson, which Governor Romney taught me, and I think is very relevant, is that you need to delegate. This is a massive challenge. And one of the reasons that I was so strongly in support of the governor is that his network of people that he can bring to the table is unparalleled. When you go to the State House and you meet with the cabinet, you're not looking at folks who've been in politics for 40 years and have learned the same lessons over and over again. You're looking at folks from the business sector, often, and from other walks of life, including public policy, who have tremendous amounts to bring to the table. Bain Capital's portfolio had, revenues equal to some European countries. And Governor Romney couldn't run that whole thing himself. He chose great people to run it. And the way the state government is working now, he's chosen great people to run his departments, and we're seeing significant progress on that. And I think the other thing I learned is about hope. The darkest hour is, some people say, right before it turns pitch black, but actually I think it's right before dawn. And we were surprised by the magnitude of this downturn, without a doubt. It was the perfect storm. Revenues across the whole spectrum collapsed at once. I think the governor shares this feeling, that we'll be surprised by the upturn as well. That when the rising tide comes, it will lift all of our boats much more quickly. And I think rather than get mired down in the difficulties of now, we need to make quick decisions to prepare ourselves for that success. So those are the lessons I learned from Governor Romney. That's why I've been such a supporter of his, and why I think he's already quickly proven he can do a great job. So with no further ado, I'll present Governor Romney.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good to see so many friends here today. Thank you, Matt. Matt is evidence of the fact that I'm not a super salesman, as I wish I could always be. I tried to convince Matt with every ounce of my energy to stay with Bain Capital, to stay back in Boston, and he said, no, I want to go back to the Berkshires. I want to go back to Williams. I want to go back and make a difference in the place that was home for many years. And he began a very successful effort here and continues to do so, although I came back and got him, this time for free, to be head of our Competitiveness Council for the western portion of our state, and to work with community and business and other leaders to make every effort we possibly can to encourage the development of our economy in this region of the Commonwealth. Let me also acknowledge our state representatives. It's good to have them here, our mayors and other elected officials. Your presence here is an honor, and obviously we all can learn from one another in the challenge that we face. It's very different to be in the status and the circumstance we have than it is to be in other states. And I've enjoyed traveling in other states. And let me tell you, while we do face our challenges, we have so much going for us that I come away being very optimistic about our future and about the potential that we have to employ our people in great jobs, to have terrific schools that care for our kids, to have a health care system that provides appropriate health care for all of our citizens. I think we can do a great job. I chuckle as I remember a story my dad used to tell me about a debate in Congress a long time ago. I don't believe this is an apocryphal story, but it may be. He said that there was a representative from Idaho who was arguing that additional funding should be appropriated for Idaho to build its economy. He said, after all Idaho needs is more good people and water. And someone from the gallery shouted out, that's all they need in hell. And we are fortunate that we have a lot of good people, plenty of water, and a lot of other things going for us. I just tick off in my mind the things that are going for us in the entire state, and there are things which are particular to the Berkshires, which the Berkshires have going as a region. Obviously, as we look at the Berkshires, the extraordinary beauty and physical resources allow us to generate revenue and attractiveness for people coming from other areas of the country, and that provides growth and benefit for us. We have artistic and cultural resources in this part of the country that draw people to us. Do you realize from a technology standpoint what we have as a Commonwealth? We have, I understand, the best trained, most highly educated workforce in the country of any state. We rank #1 in terms of graduate programs in science and engineering as a state in the nation. Half of all of the nation's Nobel Prize winners are from Massachusetts. Per person, Matt, you'll be happy to hear this, we invest more venture capital than any state in America. We are #1 in the country in terms of number of patents that are generated on a population equivalent basis. We're #1 in the nation on an absolute basis in the National Institute of Health grants which come to any state. We are highly diversified as a state with tourism, yes, but also high-tech, biosciences, financial services, life sciences, healthcare, education. We have so many advantages because of the breadth of our economic base. I had to chuckle the other day as I was seeing that the voters in Ohio are facing a ballot initiative to raise $1.6 billion, the purpose of which is to attract individuals with backgrounds in research and technology to move to their state and to begin attending their universities and other institutions so they can have some high technology research going on in their state. We have that here without having to go out and buy it. People come here, they want to live here, they vacation here, they work here, they train here. We have extraordinary resources. But that is not to say that we don't have enormous challenges. And the combination of resources and challenges suggests that if we deal with the challenges properly, that those resources will allow us to achieve the kind of future that we'd like to have for ourselves and for our families. I think we have everything in place for us to be the premier place for great jobs in the country. That people will think about Massachusetts in all of its regions as being one of the best places you could possibly live because of the great opportunities for employment that exist. We're not there today. I believe we can be. I believe people can look and say we have the best schools in the nation. Some years ago, the members of the legislature and the executive branch worked together to fashion something called education reform and put in place a series of standards to evaluate our students in particular and thereby our teachers and our schools to determine if we're up to the job of being ready for the new jobs of the future. And by virtue of doing that, we really lead the nation by almost a decade in that kind of effort, and our schools are making the kinds of changes they need to make sure that our kids have the skills to compete in today's economy. That augurs well for our future as well. We have a huge challenge as it relates to health care. Our health care costs continue to rise very quickly, in part because government doesn't pay its full price for the cost of the care that it receives for the beneficiaries that government pays for. We also leave about 500,000 people in Massachusetts to fend on their own to go to emergency rooms to receive their health care. They don't have health insurance. And as a result, we have 500,000 people who go into emergency rooms, get very inefficiently delivered care, only in acute kind of settings. And it's an inefficient and expensive system from our standpoint and unfair and complicated from their standpoint. These problems in terms of health care, in terms of our schools, and in terms of making this the best economy and the best place for jobs in the nation is something we're going to all have to work on together. Now, I tell you that the decisions we're going to make right now in the tough times determine what we're going to look like in the good times. I have noted that in the enterprises I've had the chance to be associated with, that when things get tough, that is when you make the decisions which will determine where you are when the things are good. Everybody does well in good times, almost everybody. But those enterprises that make the right decisions in difficult times set the stage for where they're going to be for the long time to come. And if they make the right decisions, they can establish a lead which can never be overcome. I chuckle as I think back, being a young consultant type. I was asked to go work with a company called the Charms Candy Company. Remember Charms Candy? See a few nodding heads here. In the 1930s and the 1940s, the Charms Candy Company was the #1 hard candy company in America. It has fallen to have annual sales of less than $1 million a year. That's a long fall. But back in the 1940s, there was a spike in the price of sugar. And the Charms Candy Company made a difficult decision in that tough time, and that was to go out and buy future contracts to keep buying sugar over a multiple year basis to make sure they'd always have a fair supply of sugar, even though they were buying those contracts at very high prices. Their smaller competitor, called Lifesaver, decided not to enter into those long contracts, but instead to buy sugar on a daily basis as they needed it. Well, the price of sugar collapsed after this huge spike, as typically happens in cycles, and Lifesaver was able to buy sugar at a fraction of the cost of Charms and became the company it is today. And Charms, of course, is still hardly even known. The same thing is true with any enterprise. The decisions we make in tough times shape dramatically the kind of future which we're going to know. To make sure we're making the right decisions as they relate to helping create more great jobs for our citizens, I've instituted something I call the TOP program, Tapping Our Potential, T-O-P. Sorry for the acronym there, but I want to make sure that we're not just talking about some new initiative, some new idea. There's no magic when it comes to creating great jobs. Instead, tapping the potential that we have, because there is so much in place in Berkshire County, in Pittsfield, Lenox, and all of our communities and in our Commonwealth, that we need to tap that potential to make sure that we're doing everything necessary to create a great future. Let me tell you some ways that I think we do that. And this, the first one may sound like an old harangue, but I want to underline it 100 times. And that is that in tough times like this, we have to be careful as state government to make sure that we don't raise the burden on you, the employers, or on those who are working for you. If we make it more difficult for you to stay and do business in Massachusetts, if we make it more difficult for the people who work for you to live here, ultimately you will move away. Now, some people shake their head and laugh at that and say, we can raise taxes, it's okay, it's not going to cause a major problem. But you recognize that for us, taxes are like the price that we charge you for being here. If you face difficult economic circumstances as you look at your forecast for the coming couple of years, some of you might have someone on your staff that says, why don't we just raise the price for the product or service we deliver? But you know that if you do that, you'll lose customers. And if you lose customers, you'll end up being further behind than had you not raised price. So you don't do it. You say instead, no, we're going to work harder. We're going to market better. We're going to call in more customers. We're going to try and do a better job delivering a better product or a better service. That's the same thing a state has to do. When we face tough times, it's so easy to say, why don't we just raise prices? Why don't we just raise taxes? That'll make everything work just fine. And it's true for a while. You see, with states, people can't move away like customers can so quickly. It takes them years and years, but they get the message. And they decide if it's time for a layoff, and I have multiple sites across the country, I'm going to take my layoff in the state that's raising taxes. And if I'm thinking of expanding, I'm going to expand in places where I can do so where I'm not seeing an increase in tax burden. And so taxes are our price, if you will. And we got to keep our price down to make sure our state is attractive and a good place to grow and do business. That's something which Washington has figured out. Both parties are arguing about an economic stimulus plan in Washington. They're talking about how big the tax cut ought to be. Well, we can't cut taxes because we have to have a balanced budget. They don't. But for a state, the equivalent from an economic development standpoint and from an economic stimulus standpoint is holding the line on taxes. Boy, I'm glad I don't live in California. I don't think that was about California. I think it was about taxes. To our friends from California, I'm glad I don't live in California. I think they have a 9% income tax rate. They're talking about putting it up to 11%. You know, if they didn't have great weather, no one would live there at all. But first, keeping our tax burden reasonable and not raising it in tough times. Let me note a second area, and that's bringing down the cost of doing business, not just the cost of taxation, but the cost that we impose on employers. We have to work constantly to assure that everything from our investment tax credit is competitive, our workers' compensation program doesn't get out of control, that our unemployment insurance rates don't become unreasonable comparable to other places or compared to other places where you can compete. Those are things that we have to do as well to make sure that you remain competitive from that standpoint. Number 3 in this top program, controlling the cost of living. This isn't as big a challenge in some parts of the Commonwealth as others. But overall, we now have the most expensive housing in America. The cost of homes in our state rose 50% since 1998. I don't know if you've seen that much of a rise, not as high as a rise as that in Berkshire County, but I'll tell you, it's very difficult for many young couples that are getting started or coming out of school to afford to live in Massachusetts and get a job here. And if that's the case, we're going to lose them, and we're going to lose employers that go elsewhere. Massachusetts is seeing New Hampshire create jobs at twice the rate we are. And I ask employers, why are you growing elsewhere? Why aren't you growing here? Why, as you're building a biotech, we have biotech centers, for instance, that are terrific centers, that are the place of research and development. We have some of the best biotechnology in the world that's coming to Massachusetts. It's largely going out to Cambridge and the eastern part of our state. Novartis has moved in there, Merck and others. But they're manufacturing facilities which I want to see come to central Massachusetts, to the Merrimack Valley, to western Massachusetts. Their manufacturing is going, in many cases, outside the state. Why is that, I ask? And the number one answer that comes back is that the costs of living are so high here that people have to be paid so much more here to work here that they find it more economic to go elsewhere. We have to make sure that our cost of housing is kept reasonable and competitive with other states so that we don't lose those jobs that otherwise would be able to stay here. I put forward a plan to do that. I've suggested, a lot of people say, well, how are you going to get the price of housing down? Well, it's not by putting in place price controls on what housing costs. That's not the answer. The answer is to build more of it. We don't have people pouring in here like they do in Florida with the fear that, gee, we can't keep up with supply. We have high prices because even though we have a relatively flat population, we don't build new housing. We need to create more housing in our state. How do you do that? Because a lot of cities and towns say, I don't want to build more housing here. We don't want more housing. Well, how are we going to get cities and towns to agree to build more housing? Well, I look at the $5.5 billion the state sends to cities and towns and figure that we should give an incentive to those cities and towns that create more housing and offer more occupancy permits, and have suggested that we earmark some $50 million as a special fund to encourage the development of more housing, particularly in our infrastructure-rich areas. I don't want to cut down a bunch of new trees for developments. I don't want to take farms and turn them into developments. But I'd like our cities and urban areas to become more intensive in their efforts to bring more housing that people can take advantage of, and so that we can have more reasonably priced product to offer to those who want to work here. Number 4, I'd like to see higher education and employers come closer together. I could not be more impressed than by looking at the example of some of our institutions of higher learning, like UMass Amherst, like MIT. I didn't realize MIT was founded with a charter to develop technology that would go into the commercial sector to employ people and make lives better. The members of the faculty at MIT are not only encouraged but required to work in the private sector and to pass along technology and research to the private sector. They generate hundreds of patents annually for enterprise in Massachusetts and around the country. UMass Amherst likewise generates tens of patents on a regular basis and works with employers to encourage the development of jobs and technology. I want to assure that that happens here, that in our institutions of higher learning in Berkshire County, as well as in Amherst, not so far away, that we just tap every possible bit of research and technology and use that for the benefit of our working people. I'm also convinced that we have a potential to shape the work that's going on at our institutions of higher learning. I've asked to get a survey of all of our employers and ask you who you're planning on hiring over the next year or two. What types of positions are you looking to fill? And then with that information, put forth a region by region wide layout of the types of employment opportunities that are going to be coming down the road, and assure that our community college and our state college and our state university systems have geared their focus and their curriculum to assure that we're training people with the skills that allow them to get the jobs that are actually going to be offered to them. Let me turn to another area, and that's making sure that we use our money more wisely. We take a lot of your money in taxation, and we spend a lot of money. We spend, depending on how you count the federal dollars, we spend about $23 billion a year as an enterprise. We ought to spend that in such a way that it really helps build employment. Now and then I hear about various projects that we're carrying out on a statewide basis, and I think, I wonder if those projects have really gone through a very careful process of assuring that if, let's say, we're going to put a lot of money in a new bridge or a road, that doing so has been thoughtfully linked to whether there's housing opportunity associated with that investment, whether there's business development and economic benefits associated with that project. I have to chuckle. I spent some time after I'd been elected with Governor Weld's chief of staff, a fellow named Mark Robinson. I said, tell me what you think about our state organization structure. And he said, well, it used to be funny in cabinet meetings. Governor Weld would come in and the transportation people would say, we have a problem. And he'd say, what is it? And they'd say, we want to build this road or change a design of an intersection, or we want to put in an extra lane or build a bridge. And he said, and then the environmental people, the secretary of our environmental agency would say, we're opposed to that. And we're fighting that, Governor. We don't want the transportation people to do that. And the governor would listen, and it would be a 10-minute conversation, and then he, let's say, would agree with the transportation people. And then he said a couple of weeks later, there'd be another argument, and he'd feel bad about having agreed just with transportation last time, so this time he'd agree with the environmental people. And he said we'd go back and forth from guardrail to guardrail. What I want to do is make sure that we all work together. If we're going to spend $23 billion, let's spend it in a way that actually helps all of the people of the Commonwealth, helps housing, helps economic development, maintains our environment, which is so key, particularly in this county, so key to our future. I've asked to take our environmental agency, our transportation agency, and our housing agency, put them all under one umbrella, a Secretary of Commonwealth Development, so we all work together, and it's working marvelously. I've asked to take, in the same area, our economic development people. They're the people that are out there competing to bring businesses here. Economic development, our labor department, as well as our regulatory department, and put all of them together under the Secretary of Economic Affairs to assure that everything we do relating to those things helps build our business. I don't have all the best ideas in the world. I'm not even sure every one of my ideas is the absolute right way to go. But I know that if we act and we move and we do our very best, that we will be able to make this economy stronger and do a better job for those that want to find good jobs. Let me underline something as I say that, because it just reminds me. I don't spend my nights worrying about whether your corporate profits are going to be up next year. I'm not worried about whether your dividends will be up or whether you're going to get a huge bonus. I must admit, I like you to get bonuses because that means more tax revenue. So all things being equal, get a big bonus, get the good stock options because that gives us more tax revenue. But I really do worry about people who are out of work and who are looking for a job. I continue to meet people and to read about people who've been out of work for a long period of time, some with extensive skills that can't find work. I think about economic development. It's a big phrase that a lot of people wonder, just what is that? I think about working to bring employers here and keep employers here and grow employers here because I want good jobs for all of our citizens. That's what's on my mind. I also know that if we have strong employers and good jobs, we'll have enough taxes to invest in our schools the way I'd really like to do. And if we're doing that, we'll also be able to put more money into our health care system and provide insurance for all of our citizens. It all works as a system. And I care very deeply about our schools and our kids and our health care and the jobs and employment of our citizens. Now, I recognize, by the way, that in addition to doing the 5 things I've mentioned, that we have to work together aggressively as a team to grow our economy in Berkshire County and in this region. That's why instead of just sitting back on Beacon Hill and saying, why don't we have our Boston Department of Economic Development determine what's best for Boston and whatever else in the state people care about, I'm going to say, no. I want to think about every region of the state as being just as important as every other. And I want to have an economic development effort, and we call it our Regional Competitiveness Council. I want these competitive councils to work within a region to say, what do we need to do to make this region vibrant and thriving and provide economic opportunity for our citizens here? And that's why I asked Matt Harris to help lead the team here and to work with employers and business leaders and people in the healthcare sector and the tourism sector to help us decide what things do we need to do to really boost the growth and development of this region of the Commonwealth. And there are a lot of things that we're talking about. I was delighted, by the way, to be able to announce that Michael Porter, some of you have heard his name, professor at Harvard Business School, author extraordinaire on building regional economies, someone who worked long ago with Bill Weld in the very early Weld years, that he's agreed to come on and work with Matt and help develop plans and strategies to stimulate the growth of our economy in Berkshire County. I'm delighted to hear that the Chamber is hosting trips to go out and meet with others. I know we have the Chamber leadership here. I guess you're going to be going to work at a nanotechnology laboratory in Albany next week. Terrific. Go everywhere you can. Steal the ideas from New York. I don't care where you get them. Get those ideas. Bring them back here. Grow our economy here. We're happy to have affiliations with our Yankee friends, New York Yankees, that is. I recognize that there's some particular issues that are touching us here. What are we going to do with that GE facility? What an extraordinary campus. How can we best use it? What are the options that we have? Are there monies we need? Is there a sales effort we need? What's the strategy going to be for that? What are we going to do about regional air issues? And how critical is that? And what should we do with regards to our airport in that regard? I know there are issues that even more particular, which is a movie theater in downtown Pittsfield. I mean, there are a lot of things that we have to discuss and work on, and I want you to know that I care about those things because I'm not worried about airplanes, and I'm not worried about buildings. I'm worried about people. And I recognize that the decisions we make in this regard will affect the lives of our citizens. Now, let me just, I better stop here because I could go on and on about this because I care very deeply about it, and I know you have to go out and make some more money so you can pay some more taxes. But I'm thinking, I went to the Red Sox game last night. It was really a treat. By the way, let me take a couple of questions from you two. Do we have time to take a couple of questions? Yes, I'll take a couple of questions, but I'll stop because I'm reminded I saw the game on TV actually earlier in the week where Fossum was pitching. You may have seen that, and it was not a good first inning. We were down 4, or was it 5 to nothing in the first inning, and Grady Little went out there to talk to him, and I anticipated a conversation something like this, where Grady said, I think it's time for you to come back to the dugout. And Fossum would have said something like, I'm not tired. I'm really not tired. I keep up. And then Grady would have said, yeah, you may not be tired, but the fielders are tired. And with that in mind, it's probably time for me to stop. Let me tell you that again, I am very optimistic. And I'm appreciative. I'm appreciative of the fact that you live here and work here and that you do your business in Massachusetts, that you live with us at the good times and the tough times, and that you employ people here. And I appreciate the fact that every dollar that we have to spend, every tax dollar, is available to us only because you are producing a good or service which stands behind that dollar. That's where the dollars come from. You are creating those dollars so that we can spend them on the things that we all care about, as well as on the products that people buy and the services they buy from one another. I'm appreciative of what you're doing. I also would tell you I'm optimistic, and optimistic enough to tell you that the economy is turning. And if you don't like the economy right now, go out and hire a couple of people and buy some additional equipment. I need you guys to go out and start this turnaround. Each of you has a chance over this summer to bring in a couple of people who may not have found a job yet from Berkshire Community College or our colleges and our universities. Now's the time to bring in a couple of people. And if we do that, we're going to see the turnaround start in a very positive way. I appreciate all that you do and look forward to a robust, dynamic economy in Berkshire County, in Western Mass, in Central Mass, in all of our state. We have a great state with a great future. Thank you so much. You sure? This is an awfully big room to do questions and answers. I'm not sure I should have said that. Maybe just questions with no answers would be better. I'm good at that. I'm learning the political way to speak for about 1 minute without having answered anything associated with a question. Are there questions or two? Yes, sir.
Yeah, last night I was at the Williamstown town meeting and we approved a $500,000 override, largely for our schools. And we all listened as an elderly resident in town talked about how she's on fixed income and she's gradually being driven out of town by gradually increasing property taxes. Could you give the folks in towns around the state some guidance from your point of view about what we should do faced with the same desire you have to support our schools, and yet having no way to do that other than local property tax? Wouldn't it make more sense to come up with some statewide solution to that quagmire, that dilemma, that didn't involve driving those fixed income people out of affordable housing?
Yeah, I don't want to see taxes go up on a local basis or on a statewide basis or on a national basis, because I believe that raising taxes is tough on those senior citizens and others that are on fixed incomes, and want to fight that in every way we possibly can. And the question is, for each community, how do you go about doing that, and how do we do that at the state level? I think there are still more reforms that we can put in place at the state level. For instance, we still have an unusual feature. Are we the only state that has 3 highway departments? I was delighted that the House of Representatives decided to merge the MDC together with our Highway Department and Turnpike Authority, so we're now down to 2. I want to get it down to 1. By our calculation, we saved $20 million in the first year, $50 million thereafter. We also have a little gold mine, because the Turnpike Authority, because it's not part of the state structure right now, has to have a $190 million reserve to stand behind its bonds. Put it inside the state, that reserve is freed up. That's $190 million. By the way, our local aid reduction is $232 million. If we get $190 million from the Turnpike Authority alone, that's real money compared to the needs of our cities and towns and communities in our total state. I also believe we have a lot of excess land. We have the inertia in a large enterprise is a real challenge. It doesn't have to be there. Yesterday, I had the privilege of giving the Company of the Year Award speech to Boston Globe companies that were identified as Companies of the Year, Gillette being one of them. Gillette has been around 100 years. 2 years ago, it lost market share in 76% of its business units. Last year, it gained market share in 80% of its business units. Big enterprises can change if they want to, and if there's motivation to do so. And I believe at our state government level, we can change. We have hundreds of millions of dollars of state property that we're not doing anything with and never will. Old state hospitals. But you know, the idea of actually selling that property so that it can be developed and turned into tax revenue for cities and towns, it's a great idea, but getting people to do it is very hard. Instead, we'll just keep on paying for maintenance fees and just keep on maintaining it year after year. By our calculation, we can take $180 million and put that into the hands of all of the state programs that we have, rather than keeping it in excess property. So reform is essential. Now, on a city and town basis, in my town, for instance, we had to make our city hall accessible for those with disabilities. It was something outside of our normal expense, and our town passed a 2.5 override to be able to pay for that. I understand when a community has a particular project that needs to be done, a new firehouse and so forth. But I personally shy away from the idea of just saying, hey, let's just override Prop 2.5 to meet our everyday operating expenses. One of the tough issues we face, and it's something you face as employers, is what we're going to do with our contracts with our state workers and our municipal workers. We're putting in place, we proposed we're calling it a municipal relief package. But I'll tell you, we have a lot of cities and towns that have not held the line in municipal raises. And the salary increases are such that the only thing towns then can do is either raise an override or cut the number of teachers and salaried employees. I'm in favor of saying let's bring to the public sector the same kind of economic discipline that you face in your businesses, in your enterprises. The idea that we have state workers and municipal workers that get 90% of their health care, in some cases paid for by the municipality or by the state, I think is wrong. I wanted to get that down to 75%. The idea that we have the overwhelming majority of all of our employees in the union, even our supervisors, doesn't make sense to me. I don't like bumping rights. There are a number of things I think we're going to have to deal with, because if we, on a municipal level or a state level, continue to raise salaries and benefits without regard to the true economics of a world where incomes overall are not rising at the rates that we're paying people, raising our state and city workers, we're in for a real clash there. So that's the effort that we have to take. Thank you. Another question back here. Yes, sir. I'll take one more. That was a long answer, so this will be my last one. Yes.
Governor, yes. The MBTA has recently awarded a contract for 216 transit cars for the Blue Line to a German company, and the cars are being built in western New York, final assembly in western New York. And you directed, earlier in your presentation, you mentioned the GE facility in Pittsburgh, and that's virtually empty. And
Pittsfield, not Pittsburgh, but that's okay. I know you're just trying to catch me. Yeah, me too.
Why is the state spending approximately $200 million in Germany and Western New York when we have the facility to assemble cars?
I am so happy you raised that question. Thank you. I'm so happy you raised that question. I talked about us spending roughly $23 billion, and let's spend it smart. Let's think about what's in our best interest. We have a remarkable phenomenon in Massachusetts that most people don't understand, and that is we have something known as quasi-independent agencies that are not controlled either by the legislature or by the executive branch. They're just quasi-independent. The Turnpike Authority is one of them. You recall that Governor Swift tried to make a change in policy, was determined by the court she couldn't. The Turnpike Authority can do whatever it wants to do. It has its own board. It does its own thing. The MBTA has its own board, can do what it wants to do. And so decisions that we might decide to make as a legislature or as an executive branch or both, we can't impose on Massport, on the Turnpike Authority, on the MBTA, and on numerous other efforts that go on in the state. We have a wonderful enterprise that helps us in development efforts, mass development. It's a terrific organization, does a great job, but it's quite independent. It has $1 billion, which it provides to various employers in the Commonwealth, but it's on its own. I'd like to see a greater degree of accountability and responsiveness to the leadership of the state, to the elected leadership of the state, so we can make sure that all of these follow the track that we would pursue. By the way, most do, and most do on just on the basis of a cordial level of respect, but not all do. And with regards to that contract, I'm not familiar with that 200 rail car contract, but I'll tell you, it drives me nuts. I know that a few years ago that we put out a contract to maintain the MBTA system, and we received a contract which over a multiple year basis was $400 million less than our current provider, Amtrak. But Amtrak and its union relationship, of course, was the provider we chose, costing us an additional $400 million. These kinds of things drive me nuts. And they're part of the reason that we have to continually fight to reform our state government, to become more agile, more willing to make change. I have to tell you, I appreciate the work of the legislature and the members of my administration who are working to do so. There are many members of the legislature, and the House came out with a budget which is filled with great reforms. The Senate is doing so today. We're making progress. We have a lot more to do. Write, call, say thanks to your representatives and your senators for every effort they make to do a better job. We can do a better job. I'm convinced we're in a great state because of the great people we have. It's good to be with you. It's good to associate with you. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Dave Bazillion, President and CEO of the Berkshire Chamber of Commerce. Governor Romney, on behalf of Steve Pierce, our Board of Directors, and our entire Berkshire Chamber membership, we would like to thank you for spending time in our region today. There are obviously some interest in your remarks this afternoon. The Berkshires is a uniquely special place to visit, to go to school, to work, to invest in, and to live. We are proud and thankful to be here. The Berkshire Chamber of Commerce looks forward to playing an appropriate role with Matt Harris and the Berkshire Regional Competitiveness Council as we develop a more effective partnership between the region and the state. The Berkshire Chamber is aware of the seriousness of our current situation, but is also committed to leading economic development by continuing to coordinate our acts of improvement. We are also fortunate to have outstanding local and state elected officials working on our behalf, and they do a great job. Governor, we would encourage you and welcome you to come back often. Our hope is that your visit today will have the same impact on the Berkshires that your visit to Fenway Park had on the Red Sox last night. On behalf of the entire Berkshire Chamber staff, thanks again, everyone, and have a great Berkshire Day. Thank you, everyone.